Okay. Hello, everybody. It's exciting to see such a big audience so early in the morning. First slide, please. Thanks. I think you chose these sort of mysterious forest imagery when you started talking about this event, and I got inspired and I started using that as a theme. So who here has been part of an innovation team or been doing innovation work, some part of their working life? Okay, that's good. Okay, quite a few people. Who here are a bit confused about if they've been doing innovation work or not? Yeah, so am I. You know, I've been working in innovation teams creating new stuff for maybe 15 years or so, and I still think that innovation is a bit of a mystery. What is it really, and how do you work efficiently, and how do you create value for people? And there are other words that you come across, like startup. I wasn't very comfortable with that word for a long time. Like, what's a startup? Who's comfortable with the word startup here? Not so many people. Who's comfortable with the word like? Oh, even louder. I probably should use the mic then. Sorry, guys. Ooh, okay. Is this better? Yeah. Okay, so maybe that's why I didn't see any raised hands. But so I mean, words like startup or even entrepreneur. I mean, that's a hard word to pronounce even. Who's comfortable with the word entrepreneur? Okay, good. So I think I've been attracted to the word innovation for a long time. I think it sounds exciting to build new stuff, create new value for people. But I didn't think that startup culture was anything for me. Like startup, I was working for more of a normal company. It wasn't a startup. Why should I study the startup literature? Next slide, please. Thanks. So I mean, when you talk about innovation and entrepreneurs and startups, like these images spring to mind, like these Silicon Valley tech giants who create stuff that people use for, decades, even, millions of, even billions of people, like these grand inventions. But innovation and invention isn't the same thing. So next slide, please. This guy to the left, this is Moritz. I've been coaching him and his co-founder, Andre, in an accelerator. And he's doing great innovation work. I think he's doing innovation work better than I ever did, probably. He works really closely to the people that he wants to create value for. So they have this idea that senior citizens who live alone could stay in touch better with their younger relatives if they have this sort of system set up that sends little messages every now and then to tell their younger family members that they are okay. So I'll tell you more in detail about this project. But I think, this to me is like an inspiring innovation project, and it's not so, inhibiting as looking at the Silicon Valley tech giants. So I think, I've been thinking about how can we make innovation maybe a little bit more approachable? How can we find good examples about people doing good innovation work? Next slide. And also, sometimes when I hear people talking about innovation, they might really be talking about inventions, like these really advanced technology solutions where, this is a Rube Goldberg machine. I just love having them in my presentations. But advanced tech, that's not necessarily innovation, right? Innovation is about creating value for people, not inventing stuff. Next slide, please. So, for example, Åsa and Fredrik, they are not creating any technology at all, but they're still working with innovation. They are Aeon employees, so they come from the energy sector, but they're running now their own little startup trying to create new experiences around buying energy. That's pretty boring. You just pay a bill every month. But they're looking for a way to make that more interesting, more engaging. And that's an innovation, creating a new experience on top of something that already exists. Or maybe it's a new business model, a new way of selling things or whatever. That can also be an innovation. But let's get into a little bit more of the details. So when you get started trying to build something new, there's a lot of confusion. you might feel a bit, lost in the woods. And every direction you look at might look the same, and you don't know where to start. So I think this is quite common, that if you're trying to do something new, there's nothing to copy, really. You can't really find some other examples of what other people have done and how they solve the problem. So you need to start somewhere. And it might look like a bit like an equation sometimes. So you might have an intended audience or user or customer in mind. You have some type of problem that you're trying to solve for those people, and you're going to provide some kind of solution. And in the beginning, all of these things might be a bit unknown. So it's like this equation. If you change one parameter, one variable, the other things change. So where do you start when everything is unknown in the beginning? Very often I see people starting with a solution, like they get excited by some tech, and that's what they want to do something around. So people say, let's do something with drones. That's so cool. What can we do with drones? And they start with a solution, and then they sort of have to cram that solution into people's lives, try to find people who might have a problem where we can apply drones, and just language again. The word application is a weird word, right? The technology comes first, and then you apply it onto something. It's a really twisted way of creating value, I think. Let's see. I think you should start with the first variable. Start with people, and this is where I think I've been doing it wrong for most of my career and working life. I mean, I've been playing around with inventions together with other designers and tech people, because it's fun, it's exciting to sit in a room together and build things. But really, we don't get in touch with people until quite late in the process. I mean, up until recently, this is what I've done, and I think a lot of people still do this. So this is actually what I started learning from reading the startup literature. And as I said before, I didn't think the startup literature was for me, but it made me look at innovation in a different way. So the first rule of startups, any startup book you will open, it says, get out of the building and talk to people. So that's what you should do actually. So you talk to people, but you need to find, who is your audience, who is your target group. You might think that your target group are farmers in the beginning, so you go out and talk to farmers, but then you realize that, no, they didn't have the problem that I thought they had, or the problems they have, I don't understand them, I can't help these people. Or you have to you need to find people that you can talk to that will get you started. And this is a hard part, but again, it gets a lot easier once you get started. And everybody I work with and coach, I try to have them read this book here called The Mom Test. I think a few people by now would have heard about it and read it. A lot of people pitch it on stages like this one. Has anybody heard of this book? Yes. Jenny, you've heard of it? Yes. No, but it's a fantastic book. It's really easy to read, like 136 pages. And it's written by Rob Fitzpatrick, who visited Malmö a few years back. So you can actually look up his presentation from the conference online. And it's an even faster way to get an idea of this technique. In 15 minutes, you'll get a fantastic pitch about how to use the Mom Test. But I'll sum it up for you. So when you start talking to people, there are two different stages. There's the learn stage, and then there's a confirm stage. And in the learn stage, you're supposed to mainly listen to people. Actually, you're not allowed to mention any of your own ideas and pitch anything. But you have an idea in mind, you have an hypothesis that you need to sort of see if this is true or not. So for example, your idea is that farmers might need drones to better check their crops so they know where to use herbicides or pesticides. So that's your hypothesis, but then you need to go out and talk to farmers and see if they actually have a problem knowing where their crops and so on, if that's a big problem for them. Are they looking for a solution right now? Are they solving it in a different way? And if you do hear that it sounds like they have a big problem about it, then you can move on to the next stage. In the confirm stage, you are actually allowed to present some type of idea to people. But you need to really listen and be very careful to listen. Do they think my idea is a good one or not? And that's hard because people are very polite and they say, "Oh, that sounds great." And it's hard to know if they really would become real customers if you went out and built this, quite advanced solution, like building drones to monitor crops. That's going to take ages to develop, right? So in the confirm stage, if you go out to people and you actually pitch to them and say, "I'm building this, what do you think?" more or less. If they say, "I really like it," you need to ask them for some type of commitment. So, okay, so you say you really like it. Do you want to meet next week for another 2 hours and talk about this? So if they're willing to spend more time with you, that's a good sign that they are really interested. And there are other types of commitments. Of course, you can ask people to pay money early. That's what you do in crowdsourcing. You can, crowdfunding, that is. Or you can actually ask people for their, to put a little bit of their reputation at stake. So if somebody says, "This is the best thing since sliced bread," and you say, "Great, can I quote you and put your face on my webpage, as a testimonial?" If they agree with that, it's a cost for them, and that means that they probably are really interested in what you're building. Because what you're looking for in this research is somebody who will be your first test customers or test users that you can work closely to while you develop your product or service. Åsa and Fredrik did this work really, really well. They went out and talked to people about their experiences buying energy, paying electricity bills. And for a long time, they were really lost in the dark forest. Like, they didn't get any good feedback from everybody. Everybody agreed that it was boring to buy electricity, but they didn't really react to any of their suggestions. But then finally they found a new angle, which was to sort of build upon the sort of locally produced trend. So they went to farmers markets and talked to people who like to buy locally produced food, vegetables. And those people seemed to really resonate with the idea of sort of buying locally produced energy from small producers. So then suddenly they had something. They had a starting point that they're now working on. So their interviews, even though it took a long time, it really paid off. They found a good starting point where there might be something. Next slide, please. So what they used in those interviews wasn't any advanced prototype or anything. They had a printout with them. They had a printout of a web page that they were thinking about building, and this is what they brought to the farmers market and started conversations around this one. And I think this is where I've been doing innovation wrong for a very long time, and I think many people do. Like, they run away and build too much too early. You can do a lot of work with just a printout like this one, right? And that's pretty amazing. So that gives you a much better place to start once you do start building your thing. So some words of warning. Difficulties that you can encounter when doing this type of work. I think one of the biggest problems is learning to handle your own ego. Everybody has a bit of an ego, I think, and you want to be right. You want to have this best idea, and for people to say, "You're amazing, that's great work," and so you have a lot of what's called confirmation bias when you go out and talk to people. You're really happy when people say things that that confirm your belief, and you might not listen so much when they don't. So you need to watch out for confirmation bias, and just any time you think that I know this, I know people need this, or this will be great, and you're just sort of listening to yourself or maybe your closest colleagues or friends, then you're in danger of running too fast in some direction that turns out to be wrong later. So for example, if you talk about Moritz and Andre, they did find senior citizens who were willing to try out their solution, and they tried to let them do their own installations even. Here are some plugs, smart plugs, try to put them into your coffee machine or your TV set or whatever, and then they did a lot of work in the background. So remotely, they could now monitor the electricity usage of these senior citizens. And then they could send little text messages to the family members of those people. So the daughter here to the right, unfortunately, I've forgotten the names of the customers in this picture, but she now gets SMS messages when her mother gets up in the morning and makes some coffee, or when she turns on the TV or turns off the TV at night. She gets a little sign of that her mother is doing okay. But they haven't built the whole system yet. Actually, they're just doing a lot of work in the background. They're thinking about implementing some smart algorithms and machine learning and blah, blah, blah to automate all this stuff. But now they're still working with just a handful of users. So they're doing all the work manually. Moritz, Andre, and their colleagues, they're actually writing those SMS messages themselves. And that way they can learn what type of messages do the family members want. Do they want to hear every time somebody makes coffee? Is that a good solution? Or, should they only send a message when something's wrong? Is that, do you want to have messages when things are good or when things are bad? I don't know. And they're trying things out and learning by being the people in the middle. So this is a good keep the last picture, please. One step back. Yeah. So that's actually called the Concierge Method. It's one of the methods that many startups use today. That when you build your solution, your product, you have very few users in the beginning. And then you can actually do a lot of manual work. You can be the servant or the consultant to your first users. And that way you will learn all the details of their lives because you're there. You're seeing a lot more than the system that you're building might see later. So just consulting and doing some, manually doing the work that the system will do later is a really great way to learn while you have few users. So what you're looking for are very few users, few customers in the beginning that really like what you do. That's the best starting point. And then you run with it. So now the next slide. And there's this sort of saying that you should run through this loop of building something, measuring the results, learning, building, measuring, learning as many times as possible, or as quickly as possible, so you don't get stuck on too slow cycles. Because if you do, like if you sort of stay in your own office, build a big solution, then launch it, and people might like it or not, you might have wasted half a year or a year without learning if what you're building is good for anybody. But if you're close to your first users, like Moritz, then you can learn a lot quicker, and you can do small changes and see how people react to them. And actually, you don't need to build a lot. As I said before, you can fake a lot instead. I mean, you can, especially if you build these sort of solutions that has artificial intelligence and these things inside. Many of the solutions you see being launched today, they have people doing a lot of manual work. I mean, they're hiding behind the front end, but it's people doing the work because they only have very few users and they want to figure out what do the users, how will the users use my service? What type of questions will they ask of the system? So actually when you're hiding, it's no longer called the Concierge Method, and it's called the Wizard of Oz method because you're the wizard behind the curtain and people believe that the service works. So another word of warning then. This is supposed to be a swamp. It wasn't so easy to find a good picture of a swamp, but yeah. You need to look out for everything that can slow you down. As I said before, this build, measure, learn loop, you want to be able to go through it pretty quickly. So if you work in a larger organization where there are people, you might have a boss or manager, and they might have bosses and managers and so on. If you feel that you need to ask for permission every time you want to run an experiment, then you're actually in trouble because it's going to be slow. An experiment might cost money. You might want to buy Google AdWords for 1,000 kroners just to see if people are going to sign up on your webpage or whatever. So you want to not have to wait for asking for a budget, and asking for permission it takes a long time. So it might be easier actually if you are your own team or you are in a startup here than if you're in a big organization. And also big organizations, next slide please, they have built up a lot of stuff already, a lot of value. They have brands that they want to protect, so they might not want to expose themselves to this sort of scrappy experimentation that startups can do. Startups have nothing to lose, but big organizations, they might be really worried. What will people think if we show them this stuff? It looks really bad. But there are ways to work your way around it. I mean, you can hide your brand and launch under a different name, and I think many people do that in crowdfunding today. Or you can start your own, accelerator on the side, like Aeon are doing, the one that I'm working for. And then you sort of release your employees into an environment where they can do these experiments more quickly. So there are definitely ways to get around this, but you need to watch out for all these things that slow you down. And if you do this, you might finally see some light in the forest, and you might even find a path and find some direction that you can start walking down. And it's not easy, It's like you should be prepared that this is stuff that fails. And I think, again, that's also why it's more fun maybe to hang out with your friends and your colleagues in your own office and do your own project, because once you expose it to the outer world, it might actually fail. You might not create any value for anybody, but that's okay. You just sort of get up and do it over again. So I think just to think about the projects that I've done. I don't know how many of them actually did create value for people. Some of them obviously did, but I thought I was doing innovation work because I was trying to invent new stuff. But really, I was never really exposing it to the outer world, and because I was part of a company sitting on an innovation team, that we didn't share it, we didn't turn it into something that we dared to put out there so it could fail. But I guess you need to do that. But anyway, there are some great methods you can use. So talking to people, first just listening, learning. Then once you have some idea that you want to measure if people are interested in, you go into the confirm stage and you ask people for commitments. And then hopefully you'll find some people who will be your target users, and you work with them as much as you can. And you try to work closely to them, so you can do like the Concierge Method, for example, or the Wizard of Oz method. And then you run through the build, measure, learn loop many times, starting with faking stuff and then building stuff for real. So I don't know if you guys do innovation work or not, and I don't sometimes know if I do either, but I think these methods are really useful, and I hope they inspire you, and maybe you can try them. Do try this at home if you And yeah, that's my message to you. Thanks.